Let me introduce you to my roommate. Her name is Bertha. She's a Fresenius 2008 T hemodialysis machine. Weighs a formidable 400 pounds. And her favorite hobby is taking every last drop of my blood on a 4-hour field trip outside my body before graciously returning it. She's a high-maintenance partner, to be sure. The upside? She doesn't use my Wi-Fi, leave passive-aggressive notes on the fridge, or hog the bathroom. The downside? If she has a bad day, I have a worse one. A much, much shorter one. This was our third date of the week, a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon. I sat in the worn leather recliner in my dedicated medical room, a converted home office that now smelled perpetually of rubbing alcohol and righteous indignation. The two thick needles in my left forearm, my lifeline, were old friends by now. I barely flinched as I'd connected the arterial and venous lines, the bright red blood beginning its familiar journey through the tubes. With a series of clicks and whirs, Bertha began her work, her internal pump thrumming a steady, life-sustaining rhythm. The sound was as comforting to me as a heartbeat. My life runs on a schedule dictated by end-stage renal failure and this noisy, life-giving beast. 4 hours a session, 4 times a week. During that time, I am quite literally tethered to this chair, to this machine. I've outfitted my prison with some creature comforts, a mini-fridge stocked with renal-friendly drinks, a 55-inch TV, and a bookshelf filled with military history tomes. It's my little sanctuary of survival. And because I'm a retired logistics specialist from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, a man who spent 30 years planning for every possible contingency, from bridge collapses to hostile insurgencies, my sanctuary is fortified. Bertha herself has a built-in battery backup, a little lithium-ion guardian angel good for exactly 30 minutes of panic time. The room is on its own dedicated medical circuit, wired directly to the main breaker. And on that main breaker box, outside on the wall of my house, is a large, laminated, impossible-to-miss sign. In bold, red 72-point font, it reads, "Medical Alert. Life support equipment in use. Do not, under any circumstances, disconnect power. Violators will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." You'd think that would be clear enough for anyone. You would be wrong. I settled back, put on a movie, and tried to lose myself in the fictional problems of fictional characters. About an hour in, I glanced out the window, and my contentment soured. There she was. Generalissimo Carol, President for Life of the Serenity Meadows Estates Homeowners Association, making her daily patrol. Carol was a woman who had discovered in the HOA covenant binder the holy scripture she'd been searching for her entire life. She was in her 60s, clad in her usual uniform of a beige pantsuit and sensible shoes, wielding a clipboard and a measuring tape like a scepter and orb. She wasn't just walking. She was scanning, her head swiveling like a radar turret, searching for infractions. A blade of grass too tall. A holiday decoration left up a day too late. A mailbox tilted at a non-regulation angle. These weren't minor issues to Carol. They were heresies, and she was the Grand Inquisitor. I watched as she stopped in front of the Hendersons' house across the street. She leaned over, squinting at their new garden gnome, a cheerful fellow with a fishing rod. I could almost hear her internal monologue. Unsanctioned mythical creature. Non-compliant beard length. Whimsical fishing pole constitutes a violation of Article 7's proscription against yard paraphernalia. She made a furious note on her clipboard. My God, the woman was a walking, talking parody, but a parody with power. My history with Carol was brief, bloody, and utterly exhausting. We'd clashed almost from the moment I'd moved in 2 years ago, seeking a quiet corner of the world to manage my health in peace. Quiet was not on Carol's agenda. Our first engagement was the mailbox skirmish. I received a crisp, passive-aggressive letter informing me that my mailbox, the very one that had come with the house, was a full quarter of an inch below the HOA's mandated height of 41 inches from the road surface. A diagram was included. I was given 10 days to rectify this grievous violation, or face a daily fine. My response, as a retired logistics man, was to consult the primary source documents. I found the official U.S. Postal Service Federal Installation Guidelines. Turns out the USPS recommends a height of between 41 and 45 inches. I was at 41.25 inches. I was, in fact, perfectly compliant. I scanned the relevant page of the federal manual, circled the measurement in bright red, and emailed the PDF to the entire HOA board with the subject line, "Regarding mailbox compliance." I received no reply, but the fines never materialized. A minor victory, but it put me on her map. Next came the Great Trash Can Offensive of last summer. I got a $50 fine in the mail. The reason? My trash and recycling bins were still at the curb at 5:01 p.m. on pickup day. The rule, a rule Carol herself had authored and pushed through, stated that all receptacles must be removed from public view by 5 p.m. sharp. I'd had a dialysis session run long that day and had gotten home at 5:15, weak and exhausted. I appealed, explaining the medical circumstances. My appeal was denied. "Rules are rules and apply to everyone equally," was the curt emailed response. So, I spent the next weekend building a small, tasteful wooden enclosure for my bins at the side of my house. Of course, I had to submit the plans, material list, and paint swatches to the Architectural Review Committee, which Carol chaired. After a 3-month approval process and a forced change from forest green paint to suburban taupe, my garbage can fortress was finally approved. But the final, defining battle, the one that made me her arch nemesis, was the battle of the ADA ramp. As my condition progressed, some days were worse than others. Post-dialysis fatigue can be brutal, making the 3 simple steps up to my front door feel like climbing Everest. My doctor recommended a simple, temporary, non-permanent aluminum ramp that could be put down on bad days. I submitted the request. Carol denied it. Her reasoning, laid out in a 2-page letter, was a masterwork of bureaucratic cruelty. The ramp, she argued, would disrupt the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood's architectural facade and create an unwelcome precedent for non-standard exterior modifications. She was trying to use HOA bylaws to deny a disabled person basic, medically necessary access to their own home. This time I didn't send a PDF. I hired a lawyer. He sent one letter, citing the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, and the specific state statutes protecting the rights of individuals with medical conditions. He gently pointed out that the potential legal penalties for the HOA would be in the range of catastrophic. 2 days later, I received a terse, 1-sentence letter signed by Carol, approving the ramp. I had won. But in doing so, I had not earned her respect. I had earned her hatred. Winning that fight taught me 2 things about Carol. 1, she believed her little covenant binder trumped federal law. 2, she didn't see a man with a serious health condition. She saw a dissident, a rebel who had challenged her authority and needed to be brought to heel. Back in the present, the hum of Bertha filled my quiet room. The movie was forgotten. My attention was fixed on the drama unfolding outside. I saw Carol, her gnome inspection complete, marching over to the green utility transformer box on the edge of my lawn where a pair of electricians from the local power company were working. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see her stabbing a finger at them, then at her clipboard. The electricians, to their credit, looked profoundly bored. My phone buzzed. It was Brenda from across the street. She was a retired nurse, a genuinely good person, and my only real ally in the neighborhood. Brenda's text. "You see this? Carol's on the warpath. Yelled at the Hendersons over a gnome, now she's lecturing the power company guys. Pretty sure she just tried to cite an HOA bylaw at them for parking their truck on the grass." My text reply. "Just another Tuesday in paradise. Keep me posted if she tries to declare martial law or annex the Hendersons' petunias." Brenda's text. LOL. "Will do. They're leaving now." "Oh, wait. She's not leaving. She's just standing there, staring at your house." I looked. Brenda was right. The utility truck was pulling away, but Carol remained. She was standing on the easement, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. She wasn't looking at the whole house. Her gaze was fixed, with a terrifying intensity, on one specific spot on my side wall. The spot where my power meter spun. The spot where the main breaker box was mounted. The spot that was home to my big, red, laminated warning sign. A cold dread, colder than the dialysis fluid chilling my blood, began to creep up my spine. I knew that look. That wasn't the "your lawn is a half-inch too high" look. That was the "Carthage must be destroyed" look. I glanced at Bertha, humming away, blissfully unaware that her very lifeblood was being eyed by a predator in a taupe pantsuit. I thought about my contingency plans. Plan Alpha was the 30-minute battery. Simple, effective for a standard blackout. Then there was Plan Bravo. Plan Bravo was not simple. It was not subtle. And it was designed specifically for a situation that went beyond an act of God and ventured firmly into the territory of an act of malice. Looking at the grim, righteous set of Carol's jaw, I had a funny feeling Plan Bravo was about to get its moment in the sun. It happened in the space between one breath and the next. One moment, the world was normal. The TV was murmuring, the air conditioning was blowing, and Bertha was humming her steady, comforting tune. The next, there was only silence. Not a peaceful silence. This was a deep, profound, predatory silence. The kind that sucks all the air out of the room and raises the hairs on your arms. The TV screen went black. The AC unit fell quiet. It was the sound of my meticulously constructed world failing. And then a new sound began, a shrill, frantic, high-pitched alarm from Bertha's control panel. Beep, 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 beep. It wasn't just an alarm, it was a stopwatch. And I was the race. My heart hammered against my ribs, a panicked counterpoint to the machine's desperate cry. My eyes darted to the small LCD screen, now glowing an ominous, hellish red in the dim room. A message was flashing, each word a tiny digital dagger. External power lost. Battery active. Time remaining 29:57. My training kicked in, a lifetime of logistics and crisis management slamming the brakes on the rising panic. Assess, orient, decide, act. I grabbed my phone from the side table. The Wi-Fi icon was gone. Of course it was. I switched to my cell data and quickly pulled up the local utility company's outage map. My entire zip code was a solid, reassuring green. No outages reported anywhere. I looked out the window. The Hendersons' house was still blazing with light. Brenda's porch lamp was on. Every other house on Serenity Lane was alive with electricity. It was just me. This wasn't an outage. This was an execution. My mind raced. I couldn't just pull the needles out. That's not how this works. Aborting a session without a proper rinse-back procedure, which requires full power to pump saline through the system and return the pint of blood currently circulating in the machine's tubes and dialyzer, was incredibly dangerous. It would leave me sick, weak, and with a significant blood loss that my body absolutely could not afford. It was a last resort, a button you press only when the building is literally on fire. There was only one way the power could be cut to a single house, and only one person I knew with the motive and the sheer unmitigated gall to do it. My thumb hovered over the 911 icon, but I stopped. Not yet. I needed proof. I needed confirmation. The ramp incident had taught me to document everything. After that fight, I had installed a small, discreet, high-definition security camera under the eave of my roof. It was battery-powered and connected to its own cellular hotspot, and it was aimed directly at my main breaker box. With trembling fingers, I opened the security app on my phone and pulled up the live feed, then rewound the footage by 2 minutes. My blood ran cold. The video was horribly, comically clear. It was like watching a nature documentary about a particularly stupid predator. Carol marched into the frame, her face a mask of grim determination. She stopped directly in front of the breaker box and stared at my big, laminated warning sign. The HD camera was so clear I could practically see her lips move as she read the words. Medical alert. Life support equipment in use. She sneered. An actual, honest-to-God sneer. Then she grabbed the handle of the box. It didn't budge. After the ramp incident, I'd added a simple combination padlock to it. It wasn't Fort Knox, but it was meant to stop a casual meddler. It was not, however, meant to stop a determined zealot armed with a garden tool. Carol, momentarily thwarted, marched out of frame. She returned a second later holding a sturdy-looking metal trowel. She jammed the tip into the seam of the box and grunted, putting her entire body weight into it. There was a screech of protesting metal as she pried the locked panel open, bending the door. She paused, looked around the quiet cul-de-sac like a B-movie villain, then reached inside. With one single, purposeful, vicious flip of her hand, she threw the main breaker switch down into the off position. The footage captured her dusting off her hands, a smug, triumphant nod on her face as if she'd just single-handedly won a war. Then she turned and strode away, vanishing from the frame. I just stared at my phone screen, a strange mix of cold fury and incredulous awe washing over me. There it was, video evidence of HOA President Carol, in all her beige glory, committing a felony. Attempted murder via home improvement tool. You had to admire the sheer, unadulterated audacity. She didn't just cross a line, she pole-vaulted over it with a psychotic grin on her face. I saved the video file, uploading it to 3 separate cloud services. Evidence secured, assess, orient, decide, act. It was time to act. But 911 wasn't the first call. That was step 2. Step 1 was Plan Bravo. My thumb moved from the security app to my phone's contact list. I scrolled to G and pressed the name. It rang once. Gus. The voice on the other end was gruff, businesslike. Gus, Mark here. There was a slight pause, then a sigh. Hey, Mark, don't tell me. It's time, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. Execute Contingency Bravo, full package, hostile action confirmed. Understood, Gus said, his tone shifting instantly to pure professional. There was a sound of an engine starting in the background, a deep diesel roar. I'm 5 minutes out. The beast is already warm. See you in 5, I said. I hung up the phone. I glanced at the dialysis machine. The red numbers on the screen seemed to mock me. Battery time remaining, 24:12. I leaned my head back against the worn leather of the recliner and closed my eyes. Now I wait. The cavalry was on its way. 4.5 minutes later, the world began to change. It started not as a sound, but as a feeling. A low, resonant vibration that hummed up through the foundation of the house and into the soles of my feet. It grew quickly, a seismic thrumming that rattled the glass in my window frames. It was the kind of ground-shaking tremor that signals the arrival of something immense, something that doesn't belong in the quiet, manicured world of Serenity Meadows. My phone buzzed frantically on the table beside me. It was Brenda. Brenda's text. "OMG, Mark, what is happening? It sounds like a tank. Is it a tank? Please tell me you didn't buy a tank." I chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. I peeked through the blinds. Down the street, turning onto our pristine, tree-lined cul-de-sac, was a vehicle that made Brenda's tank comparison seem only slightly exaggerated. It was an M977 Hempt, a heavy expanded mobility tactical truck. 8 massive, thick-treaded wheels on an articulated chassis, a cab that sat 10 feet off the ground, and a flatbed trailer behind it. The whole rig was painted a flat, no-nonsense industrial gray that was only slightly less intimidating than military camouflage. And sitting on that trailer was a self-contained, sound-dampened diesel generator the size of a small shipping container. With a deafening hiss of air brakes, a sound like a mythical beast sighing, the Colossus pulled to a stop directly in front of my house. Its massive front bumper was so close to Carol's prize-winning rose bushes that they seemed to wilt in terror. The driver's side door swung open, and a man climbed down from the cab. In the great suburban arms race of petty annoyances, Carol had brought a garden trowel. I had brought a 60-ton, 8-wheel drive, 500-horsepower instrument of total neighborhood dominance. Some might call it overkill. I called it sending a clear and unambiguous message. Checkmate? The man who hopped down from the Hempt's cab was Gus. Gus was built like an industrial vending machine, solid, square, and seemingly immovable. He wore grease-stained coveralls and a baseball cap, and his face was a stoic mask that suggested he had witnessed the fall of empires and been only mildly inconvenienced. He was the owner of Gus's Mobile Power Solutions, a company that specialized in emergency power for everything from rock concerts to FEMA disaster sites. He was also an old army buddy, a man who understood and appreciated the beauty of overwhelming logistical superiority. He and his 2-man crew moved with the fluid, no-wasted-motion efficiency of a NASCAR pit crew. They didn't speak. They communicated with hand signals and grunts. Hydraulic outriggers extended from the truck's chassis, stabilizing it with a solid thump. The generator was unhooked. Thick, black cables, looking like sleeping anacondas, were unspooled from reels on the side of the truck. This symphony of professional competence was interrupted by a screech. Carol came storming out of her front door, her face a blotchy, furious red. Her timid husband, Bill, trailed nervously in her wake, wringing his hands. "Stop!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with rage. "What in God's name do you think you're doing? You cannot park this monstrosity here. This is a gross violation of HOA bylaw 12C regarding the overnight parking of commercial vehicles." Gus didn't even honor her with a glance. He pointed a thick finger at my breaker box. "Primary feed goes to the main breaker," he grunted at his crew. "Let's make it clean." "Did you hear me?" Carol's voice ascended into a register that could shatter glass. "I am the president of this homeowners association. I am in charge here. I order you to cease this instant and remove this vehicle from our community." Gus finally, slowly turned his head. He looked her up and down, his expression one of mild curiosity, like a geologist examining an uninteresting rock. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble. "First, it's the middle of the afternoon. Your overnight rule doesn't apply. Second, this is a designated emergency medical response vehicle, currently engaged in a life-preserving operation. That means federal and state law give me carte blanche to park wherever I damn well please to get the job done. That includes on top of your precious petunias if necessary. Now, your little rule book is real cute, but it's trumped by about 6 different federal statutes. So with all due respect, please step back before one of my guys trips over you." He turned back to his work. Carol stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a beached fish. She had just been hit with a logic bomb of legal and logistical reality, and her brain had short-circuited. Gus's team, completely ignoring her, continued to run the main cable from the generator to my house, laying it carefully across my lawn. Rendered speechless by Gus's impenetrable wall of professionalism, Carol did the only thing a person like her could do when their authority is challenged. She pulled out her phone and called for bigger guns. Minutes later, a single police cruiser from the local precinct rolled quietly up to the curb, its lights off. It parked behind the massive HEM TTT, looking like a toy car. 2 officers emerged. One was older, with the weary eyes and slumped shoulders of a man 20 years into dealing with nonsense like this. His name tag read, Davis. The other was younger, fitter, with a sharp haircut and an earnest expression that suggested he hadn't had his soul crushed by suburban drama yet. His tag read, Miller. Carol descended upon them like a hawk on a field mouse. "Officers, thank God!" she exclaimed, rushing to meet them. "Arrest this man!" She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Gus. "He is trespassing. He's brought this war machine into our peaceful community. And the man in that house," she swiveled and pointed at my front door, "is running an illegal industrial site from his home. There are noises and chemicals." Officer Davis pinched the bridge of his nose and sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 petty disputes. "Okay, ma'am. Just everybody calm down. Let's start from the beginning, sir," he said, turning to Gus. "Can you tell me what this is all about?" Gus wiped his hands on a rag and hooked it into his belt loop. "Delivering and deploying an emergency power unit for a medical procedure, officer," he said calmly. "The homeowner is on life support. His power was deliberately cut off at the main breaker." Officer Miller turned his attention to Carol. "His power was cut? Ma'am, the utility company didn't report any outages in this area." Carol puffed out her chest, a self-satisfied, triumphant look on her face. This was her moment, the moment where the authorities would surely see things her way. "Of course not," she declared proudly. "I turned it off. It was a punitive action. He has been in continuous violation of multiple HOA bylaws, including hedge height and unapproved exterior modifications. He refused to comply, so I was forced to escalate." A long, profound silence descended upon the cul-de-sac. Gus stopped working. His crew stopped working. Brenda, who was now openly watching from her porch, froze. Davis and Miller just stared at Carol, their faces blank with disbelief. Officer Davis was the first to speak. His voice was dangerously quiet. "Let me get this straight. You walked onto his private property, broke into a locked utility box, and intentionally shut off his power?" "Yes," Carol said, nodding enthusiastically. "Exactly, to enforce the rules." "The rules," Davis repeated, his voice flat. "Ma'am, you do realize you just admitted to multiple crimes, don't you? Destruction of property, trespassing, and tampering with a utility service for a start." This was my cue. I had been watching the entire glorious farce unfold from my window. My battery timer was ticking down. 8:47. It was time to drop the hammer. I used my phone to call the precinct's non-emergency number, a number I'd saved long ago. I knew from experience it would be patched through to the officer's in-car radio system. A moment later, I heard the crackle of a radio from the squad car. Officer Davis, looking annoyed, walked over and answered it. "This is Officer Davis." "Officer Davis," I said, my voice coming through the radio's speaker, calm and clear enough for everyone on the street to hear. "This is Mark from 124 Serenity Lane. I believe you're standing in my front yard?" Davis's eyes widened slightly. He looked from his radio to my house and back. "Yes, sir, we are." "I'd love to come out and talk," I continued, But as you've probably gathered, I'm a little tied up right now, literally. The woman you're speaking with, Carol, is the one who shut off my power while I was connected to my hemodialysis machine. My security camera got a lovely high-definition video of her prying open the box and flipping the switch. Would you like me to text you the file? The effect of my announcement was instantaneous and beautiful. Every jaw on the street, with the exception of Gus's, dropped. Officer Miller's professional poker face crumbled into sheer shock. Officer Davis just stared at my front window with a newfound respect. "Yes, sir," Davis said into his radio, his voice now all business. "Please do that." I texted him the video file. He and Miller huddled by their car, their heads bent over the small phone screen. I couldn't see their faces, but I could see their shoulders tense. I saw Davis's head snap up. He looked over at Carol, who was now looking confused and a little scared, and his expression was one of pure, undiluted fury. He strode back towards her, his weariness completely gone, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged authority. "Carol," he said, and the use of her first name was like a slap. "I have just watched a video of you willfully destroying private property to cut the power to a residence, despite a clear medical warning sign." He gestured towards my house. "Sir, you on the radio? What exactly is your medical condition?" I didn't need the radio for this. I projected my voice through the open window. "End-stage renal failure. I'm on home hemodialysis. That machine is my kidney." A collective gasp went through the small crowd of neighbors who had gathered. Brenda covered her mouth with her hand. Bill, Carol's husband, went white as a sheet. Davis turned his icy gaze back to Carol. Her face had drained of all color. The smug self-righteousness had evaporated, replaced by the dawning, horrific understanding of what she had done. It's just some machine," she stammered. "He's just an attention seeker, the Hedges." "You shut off a man's life support over his Hedges," Davis stated, his voice flat and heavy with contempt. "Ma'am, please turn around and place your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for felony reckless endangerment and assault." As Officer Miller moved in to cuff a suddenly shrieking Carol, a new sound split the air. Gus, seeing that the legalities were being handled, gave me a massive thumbs up from my lawn. "We are green for ignition," he yelled over Carol's protests. He slapped a large red button on the side of the generator. There was a deafening K-chunk of a heavy-duty contactor, followed by the explosive roar of a V12 diesel engine designed to power a field hospital, coming to life. The sound was apocalyptic. It was glorious. Inside my house, every light flashed on with the power of 1,000 suns. My TV blared back to life. And inside my medical room, the frantic, desperate beeping of Bertha's alarm stopped. It was replaced by her steady, happy, life-sustaining hum. I looked at the screen. The battery backup had disengaged. A new message was displayed in comforting green letters: "External power stable." I glanced at where the battery timer had been: 1:14. A minute and 14 seconds to spare. As the police car pulled away, its lights now flashing, with a screeching, hysterical Carol in the back seat, the beautiful, triumphant roar of Gus's generator echoed through the stunned silence of the neighborhood. It was the sound of victory. It was the sound of peace and quiet, brought to you by a V12 diesel engine and a healthy dose of common sense. In the immediate aftermath, the cul-de-sac felt like the scene of a recently departed rock concert. A small crowd of my neighbors stood on their lawns, staring at the massive gray generator now idling with the steady, ground-shaking thrum of a resting dragon. The air smelled of diesel and justice. Brenda, my nurse neighbor, gave me a double thumbs up from her porch, a wide grin on her face. The Hendersons, owners of the offending gnome, were openly applauding. In an act of quiet suburban defiance, Mr. Henderson walked out to his lawn and defiantly placed a pink plastic flamingo next to his gnome. It was a revolution in miniature. An hour later, my dialysis session finished. I went through the rinse-back procedure, disconnected my lines, and felt the familiar wave of post-treatment fatigue wash over me. But it was a good fatigue, a fatigue born of survival, not sickness. I put on a fresh shirt and shuffled to my front door, drawn by a timid knock. It was Bill, Carol's husband. He stood on my welcome mat, his shoulders slumped, his face pale and haggard. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world implode. "Mark," he began, wringing his hands, his eyes darting everywhere but at me. I am so sorry. I had no idea. I mean, I knew she was zealous, but I never, ever imagined." I held up a hand, cutting him off. I wasn't angry. I was too tired for anger. I just needed him to understand. "Bill," I said, my voice calm and level. "Let's be crystal clear about what happened here. Your wife didn't try to give me a fine. She didn't try to get my lawn resodded. She tried to kill me. The fact that she was too ignorant to understand the consequences of her actions doesn't change the potential outcome. Do you grasp the full severity of that?" He nodded frantically, his eyes wide with a terror that was finally truly dawning. "Yes. God, yes. I do now. Is there anything I can do? Anything at all? To make it right?" I stared at him for a long moment. This broken, spineless man was now my best hope for a lasting peace. "Yeah, Bill, there is," I said. "With Carol, indisposed, the HOA needs an acting president. That's you now." He looked like he was going to be sick. "Me?" "You," I confirmed. "And your first order of business tomorrow morning is to call an emergency board meeting. You are going to pass an emergency amendment to the bylaws. It will be called the Medical Necessity Precedence Clause. It will state that any and all issues regarding a resident's documented health, safety, and accessibility are immediately and permanently exempt from any and all cosmetic or aesthetic regulations. Full stop, no debate." He nodded, absorbing the words. "Your second order of business," I continued, "is to draft a formal written apology from the HOA, signed by you, to me, and to the Henderson family. It will be posted on the community message board." Another nod. "And your third, and most important, order of business, Bill, is to ensure that this neighborhood stays quiet. Not HOA rules quiet, with its petty tyrannies and beige-colored fences. I mean actually quiet. The kind of quiet where people are left alone to live their lives in peace. You are going to take that 3-ring binder of rules your wife worshipped, and you are going to pare it down to the bare essentials. Pay your dues, don't burn your house down, and be a decent human being. Are we clear?" "Crystal," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Crystal clear, Mark. I promise." He looked so utterly defeated, so completely broken, that I almost felt a flicker of pity for him. Almost. He scurried away, a man with the weight of his wife's sins now firmly on his shoulders. Later that evening, I sat on my porch, nursing a bottle of water. The generator, my magnificent gray savior, still rumbled away at the curb, a constant, reassuring presence. Gus was leaning against its massive fender, sipping coffee from a stained thermos. "Gus, my friend," I said, raising my bottle in a toast. "You're a poet, a scholar, and the finest logistics man I've known since I left the service. You were here in 4.5 minutes. Gus grinned, a rare sight. "That's what the hostile action retainer package is for, Mark. It's not cheap, but it buys you peace of mind. Or, in this case, a mobile power plant capable of running a small hospital. So, what's the plan? You want this beauty for the week? Send a message?" Let it run for 48 hours, I said. Let the message marinate in the neighborhood's consciousness. Then, I want you and your crew out here on Thursday to survey for Phase 2. Gus's eyebrows went up. You're finally pulling the trigger? The permanent solution? The permanent solution, I confirmed. I want the in-ground quiet model, the Suburban Peacemaker 3000E. I want it buried, hidden, and tied directly into my property's power grid so that if so much as a single squirrel sneezes on a transformer 2 miles away, my house doesn't even flicker. You got it, Gus said, slapping the fender of the generator affectionately. I'll get the permit started in the morning. I have a feeling the HOA approval process will be streamlined. My phone rang. It was my lawyer, David. I'd left him a voicemail an hour earlier. Mark, he said, his voice practically vibrating with legal glee. I just got off the phone with a friend in the DA's office. This is the most beautiful case I've ever seen. They're hitting her with felony reckless endangerment, assault with a deadly circumstance. That's a thing, apparently. And destruction of property. With that video, a dozen neighbor witnesses, and your medical records, she's toast. The DA is taking this very seriously. What about the HOA? I asked. Oh, the HOA, David purred. The civil suit is going to be a masterpiece of financial devastation. We're not just suing her, we're suing the entire association for gross negligence in enabling her and for failing to act on your previous ADA complaint. We'll go for damages, emotional distress, punitive damages. By the time we're done, we won't just own them, Mark. We will be them. We'll rewrite the covenants ourselves. I'm thinking of a single clause. Don't be a jerk. I smiled. I like it, David. Make it so. 1 month later, Serenity Meadows was a different place. Carol and Bill were gone. Faced with crippling legal fees and the open hostility of the entire neighborhood, they had sold their house at a loss and moved to another state. Carol had pleaded guilty to a lesser charge to avoid jail time, but she was saddled with massive fines, a year of probation, mandatory anger management counseling, and a court order that permanently barred her from ever holding a position of authority in any community association in the country. In my backyard, hidden from view by a tasteful fence and some new, lush landscaping, all approved in a single, terrified email from then-President Bill, sat the concrete housing for my permanent backup generator. It was a whisper-quiet, natural gas-powered unit, powerful enough to run my house and my 2 immediate neighbors for a week. The neighborhood's oppressive atmosphere had lifted. The Hendersons' gnome and flamingo had been joined by a small stone gargoyle. Someone down the street had painted their front door a cheerful, unapproved shade of blue. A family had installed a basketball hoop over their garage. The old guard of Carol's sycophants on the HOA board had resigned in shame, replaced by a new group headed by Brenda, whose primary platform was fewer meetings and more block parties. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was on my porch. Gus's team had installed a medical-grade, weatherproof power outlet right on the porch wall, so on good days I could take my treatment outside. Bertha was humming away beside me, a gentle, familiar presence in the warm afternoon air. I was watching the sunset, feeling the gentle breeze, a prisoner set free. A new family was moving into Carol's old house. Their young son was on the sidewalk, joyfully defacing it with bright blue and yellow chalk. I saw the dad look over at the chalk, then at me, then at the still faint outline of where the Hempt's tires had rested on the asphalt. He just smiled, gave his son a thumbs up, and went back to unloading a box. They say good fences make good neighbors. That's a decent start, I suppose. But I've found a better way. A 200-kilowatt permanent whole-house backup generator, born from an act of spectacular, disproportionate retaliation, doesn't just make good neighbors. It makes for very, very considerate ones. For the first time since I'd moved in, Serenity Meadows was finally living up to its name. All it took was a little shock to the system,